Speaker, the Liberals are letting down Canadian farm families. Not only are they imposing higher carbon taxes and failing to defend them against actions by the government in China, now the Agriculture Minister is claiming that farmers who are upset about being let down during this crisis just don't understand the programs that her government is putting forward. She claims that the $252 million of re-announced money for farmers is good enough. When will the Prime Minister put forward programs that actually work for farmers instead of telling them to be happy with what they've got?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, farmers across the country support us every day in the way they're putting food on our table in a quality, with reliable quality, and we need to continue to support them. We announced more than $77 million to support food processors during this crisis. To help cattle and hog producers, we launched a $125 million national agri-recovery initiative to help them adapt as they process less meat. We're also launching a surplus food purchase program, starting with a $50 million fund to help ensure farmers are being compensated for their hard work. For dairy producers, we will work to increase the Canadian Dairy Commission's line of credit by $200 million. We will continue to be there for our farmers.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, Canada used to have a history of principled leadership on the world stage. The government of China has launched an unprecedented attack on the rights and freedoms of the people of Hong Kong. Now, this government should go beyond statements and should act in concert with our allies to show the government of China that they must abide by their commitments. Will the Prime Minister unequivocally condemn the actions of the PRC, and will he propose a real plan for supporting the people of Hong Kong and our allies around the world that have already started to be targeted by Chinese retribution?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canada has always been very clear in standing up for human rights around the world, including in regards to the Chinese government. We support the over 300,000 Canadians who live in Hong Kong and support all people of Hong Kong as they look to continue the one country, two systems rule that has been in place in Hong Kong and China for a couple of decades now. We will continue to stand up strongly for human rights on the world stage, working with our allies and holding others to account. We call for a de-escalation of tensions and for the Chinese government to listen to citizens in Hong Kong who have important things to say.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
A concrete way that the Prime Minister could actually support the people of Hong Kong is to unequivocally condemn the actions of the communist regime in Beijing. They are the ones who are violating the one country, two systems principle. And this Prime Minister is refusing to condemn those actions and refusing to propose any kind of plan to support our allies across the world. Now, when Russia invaded Ukraine, Canada, under a Conservative government, led the world in promoting a series of coordinated economic and political measures that punished and isolated the Putin regime and sent the clear message that violations of international law will not be tolerated. Will the Prime Minister condemn the actions of the PRC and propose a meaningful plan to support the people of Hong Kong?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have expressed in no uncertain terms our deep concern over the measures proposed by the People's Republic of China in regards to Hong Kong. We stand with the people in Hong Kong who believe freedom of expression, freedom of assembly continues to be an essential part of their way of life. We will continue to work with our allies all around the world to stand up for human rights, including in Hong Kong.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Why is it so hard for this Prime Minister to condemn the actions of the Communist government in China? This Prime Minister has let Canada get bullied and pushed around on the world stage. 2 Canadians are being held illegally. The government of China put blocks on Canadian exports. All the while, this Prime Minister has done nothing. And now the PRC is violating the one China, two systems policy and violating the rights and freedoms of the people of Hong Kong. Why is it so hard? What is he so afraid of to stand up to the PRC? Why does he continue with a policy of appeasement?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my job as Prime Minister is to stand up for Canadians, is to be there to defend the rights of Canadians and protect Canadians both at home and abroad. That is why we have been unequivocal in our defence of the two Michaels arbitrarily detained in China. We've continued to work to resolve that situation. We will continue to stand up for the Canadians' rights, for Canadian interests, including agricultural producers and exporters. We will continue to defend Canadian interests everywhere around the world, including with China.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The problem is, Mr. Speaker, is that he has actually done nothing to stand up to Canadians. What did he do after 2 Canadians were held illegally by the PRC? He still wrote that check to the Asian Infrastructure Bank, Mr. Speaker, still gave that institution Canadian taxpayers' money to help further the advancements of the foreign policy of China. And now here we are today, and he refuses to condemn these actions. These are actions that have been condemned by governments around the world, by public policy institutions. Why is it so hard for him to just call this out for what it is? An abuse of the rights and freedoms of the people of Hong Kong.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we put out a very strong statement alongside the government of the UK and of Australia with our deep disagreement over the measures put forward, proposed by China for Hong Kong. We will continue to defend the rights of people in Hong Kong, particularly the 300,000 Canadians who live there. We continue to defend Canadian interests around the world, including in regards to China.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Quebec has an economic fabric which is special because over the last decades, a fantastic fabric of small and medium-sized industries has been built up, which is now being threatened by the pandemic. And many of these companies might be built by larger companies and foreign companies. It's a problem. $100,000, $200,000, or $300,000 could help save some of these small companies, but that money instead is going to go into the coffers of the Liberal Party of Canada. Will the Prime Minister immediately commit to not dipping into the wage subsidy program? The Right Honourable, the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we have created a wage subsidy program to help companies and nonprofit organizations, as well as others, to retain their employees during the pandemic. We know that workers in different kinds of organizations need to keep on paying their rent and buy groceries, and that is why we have put in place this wage subsidy for all organizations and companies which need the money. We need our economy to come back strong at the end of this pandemic. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Quebec as a whole is listening to the answers and the non-answers of the Prime Minister. Let's be serious. A program is for someone who needs it, but a rich political party, which raised about $3 million in the first quarter, does not need that money. So can we keep that money and send it to small businesses in Quebec? Between 30% and 50% of these companies might go bankrupt. So instead of leaving the money for the Liberal Party of Canada. The Right Honourable, the Prime Minister of Canada. Mr. Speaker, we have created programs to help workers across the country, be it the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, which is helping 8 million people across the country, be it the wage subsidy program, which is helping workers as well. We have made investments to provide credit to small businesses, and we will continue to make sure that companies and workers who need it receive the support they need during the crisis.
South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've seen that in this country, Canadians have to make an impossible choice. When they're sick, without paid sick leave, they have to choose between going to work and potentially risking infecting their coworkers or staying at home and not knowing if they can pay the bills. Will the Prime Minister commit to immediately putting in place a guarantee that all Canadians can receive paid sick leave?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we agree that nobody should have to choose between staying home with COVID-19 symptoms or being able to afford rent or groceries. That's why the government will continue discussions with the provinces without delay on ensuring that as we enter the recovery phase of the pandemic, every worker in Canada who needs it has access to 10 days of paid sick leave a year. We will also consider other mechanisms for longer term to support workers with sick leave. We thank the Leader of the NDP and the entire NDP caucus for working with us on this issue.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
Thank you very much for that response. On a obtenu un engagement.
We got a commitment from the Prime Minister to help Canadian men and women living with disabilities. It's been weeks and no action has been taken. When will the Prime Minister provide assistance for people living with a disability?